The air smelled of burnt rubber, wet soil, and fading gunpowder. The European sky in late 1944 was neither blue nor gray. It was heavy, like a curtain refusing to rise after a tragedy. The war in Western Europe was shifting. The Allies were advancing, and the Reich was crumbling piece by piece. On a muddy road outside Aachen, a column of German prisoners walked under the watch of American MPs. Among them were a group of women, nurses from a field hospital of the Wehrmacht, still wearing their Red Cross armbands and mud-stained gray coats. Their faces were pale, yet proud. They had tended to the dying for years, but now, for the first time, they were the ones unsure of what awaited them. The American soldiers didn't treat them cruelly. They were tired men, their faces wind-bitten and dusty, but their rifles stayed steady, and their orders were clear. All German personnel, medical or not, were to be escorted to a holding area behind Allied lines. Among the nurses was Anna Vogel, a 26-year-old from Munich. Her hands were bandaged from shrapnel wounds she'd received while trying to save wounded soldiers during a bombing raid. She had studied nursing before the war, dreaming of healing, not of war, not of ideology. But now she was walking as a prisoner through a land her government had called enemy territory. Anna whispered, "At least we're alive. That must mean something." Beside her, another nurse, Greta Hoffman, older and sterner, replied quietly, "Alive, yes, but what will they do with us?" No one answered. The line kept moving. The women were taken to a temporary prisoner of war camp near Liège, Belgium. It wasn't like the stories they had heard. The barbed wire was there, yes, but the guards didn't shout, and food came regularly. The Americans seemed organized, efficient, almost indifferent to who their prisoners were. At night, the nurses sat in their barracks, sharing thin blankets and whispering about home. Some feared what was next. Others felt a strange calm. For the first time in years, there were no air raids, no wounded soldiers screaming for morphine, no officers barking orders. Then, one morning, an American officer entered the barracks. He was young, perhaps 30, with a clipboard in hand and a calm voice. "Ladies," he said, "you're being transferred. We need trained medical staff to assist in one of our hospitals for wounded POWs. You'll be under supervision, but your medical experience is needed." The nurses looked at each other in confusion. Greta frowned. "Work? For the Americans?" The officer simply nodded. "You'll be treated fairly. You'll have food, shelter, and safety. It's voluntary, but it would help the wounded." Anna stepped forward before she even realized it. "We'll help," she said softly. "We are nurses. That's what we do." Within hours, they were on a military truck headed toward an American field hospital set up in a quiet valley not far from the front. The drive was surreal. The countryside was dotted with burned tanks, shattered trees, and the black skeletons of farmhouses. Yet, as they approached the American sector, the scenery changed. The tents were orderly, clean. Trucks moved like clockwork. And even through the chaos of war, the Americans had built something that looked alive, organized, hopeful. When the truck stopped, the nurses stared in disbelief. The field hospital stretched across the valley like a small town. Rows of large canvas tents, power generators humming, surgical wards illuminated even at night. There were ambulances, kitchens, water pumps, and medics in spotless white aprons. Anna turned to Greta, whispering, "This can't be real. It looks like a city." A tall American nurse greeted them at the gate. She smiled politely, though her eyes carried fatigue. "Welcome," she said. "You'll be working under supervision in the recovery wards. Follow me." Inside the main tent, the German women froze. Metal tables shone under electric light. The air smelled of antiseptic, not blood. There were shelves full of medical supplies, bandages, morphine, sulfa drugs, glass syringes, all neatly organized. To Anna and the others, it felt like walking into another world. Back in Germany, they had struggled with shortages for years. Every ampule of morphine was precious. They reused needles, boiled instruments over open fires, and often operated by candlelight. But here, everything seemed limitless. Anna stared at the rows of gleaming surgical instruments. How do they have so much?" she whispered. An American doctor overheard her. He smiled faintly, his accent crisp and southern. "Logistics, ma'am. We make sure the wounded get what they need." That night, as the nurses worked side by side with their former enemies, the shock grew deeper. The Americans didn't treat them as captives, they treated them as colleagues. When Anna carefully changed the bandages of a wounded American soldier, he didn't glare at her. He simply said, "Danke," in broken German, and then smiled weakly. Greta, who had been skeptical, found herself watching the American nurses with fascination. They moved with calm precision, using clean gloves, sterilized tools, and methods that felt almost futuristic. In the corner, she saw a machine she didn't recognize, an oxygen regulator connected to a mask. "What is that?" she asked softly. "Helps them breathe," replied an American nurse. "We use it after chest injuries." Greta's eyes widened. We've never had anything like that." Hours passed. The two groups worked through the night. Language barriers faded, replaced by gestures, nods, and quiet cooperation. The Americans offered coffee, strong, dark, and hot. The German nurses tasted it like something sacred. For years, their own rations had been weak substitutes made from roasted barley. At midnight, Anna stepped outside the tent. The valley was silent, the night sky shimmering with distant artillery flashes. She could hear faint laughter from some American medics nearby, playing a harmonica by a campfire. It felt unreal. She thought of her patients back in Germany, the broken boys she had tried to save with empty hands, the endless shortages, the despair. And here her captors were healing their own wounded with an abundance that seemed impossible. When she returned inside, an American orderly was unloading more crates marked U.S. Army Medical Department. Anna leaned closer. Inside were bottles of penicillin, hundreds of them. Her breath caught in her throat. She had only heard rumors of this new drug capable of stopping deadly infections in hours. In Germany, only a handful of doctors had ever seen it. She looked at Greta, whispering, "This medicine could have saved hundreds of our men." Greta nodded slowly, her face pale. "And now it's everywhere. They treat it like water." As dawn crept over the valley, Anna sat on a wooden crate, exhausted but awake. Around her, the Americans worked with quiet efficiency, cleaning instruments, restocking supplies. A young medic approached her, offering a tin mug. "Here, hot cocoa." Anna hesitated, then accepted it. The warmth spread through her hands. She looked up and said, "Why are you being kind to us?" He shrugged. "War's almost over, ma'am. Maybe it's time we start acting like it." For a moment, Anna couldn't speak. She stared into the distance, where the first rays of light touched the hospital tents. She felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope mixed with sorrow. Morning came with the faint hum of generators and the distant rhythm of boots on gravel. The American field hospital stirred like a small city awakening. Nurses carried trays of metal instruments, doctors discussed patient lists, and mess tents began serving coffee thick enough to stand a spoon in. Anna Vogel rose from her cot, the canvas still damp with morning dew. Around her, the other German nurses were quietly dressing, tying their hair and folding their gray coats over their borrowed American uniforms. They no longer wore insignias or armbands, just plain white aprons marked medical staff. For the first time since her capture, Anna didn't feel like a prisoner. She felt like a nurse again. When she stepped outside, a light fog rolled over the valley. Trucks rattled in and out of camp carrying the wounded from the front lines. The smell of antiseptic and diesel mixed in the cold air. An American orderly waved at her from the entrance of the recovery tent. "Morning, Fräulein Vogel. You're with Ward 3 today. Chest injuries, mostly." She nodded, slipping on her gloves. Inside, the tent buzzed with quiet efficiency. Rows of cots lined both sides, each occupied by a wounded soldier. The groans were fewer than she expected. Morphine was plentiful here. The soft crackle of a radio played Glenn Miller in the background, a strange comfort in a world built on pain. Greta Hoffman joined her, carrying a tray of syringes. "They asked me to help with blood transfusions," she whispered. "They have glass bottles of blood, Anna, whole shelves of them, different types, labeled, stored cold." Anna looked up stunned. "Cold storage here?" Greta nodded. "They have electric coolers powered by generators. I saw one doctor check a blood sample with a microscope. It's like a different century." Nearby, an American surgeon, Captain William Carter, motioned for Anna to assist him. His face was tired but calm, his voice low and steady. "You've done triage before?" "Yes, Captain." "Good. We'll need you in the next hour. We're bringing in more from the Hurtgen forest. Bad frostbite cases and shrapnel wounds. Be ready with warm saline and blankets." Anna's pulse quickened. She'd heard of that forest. It was where thousands of men were dying not only from bullets, but from the cold itself. Minutes later, the sound of engines filled the valley again. Ambulances rolled up, their doors swinging open to reveal the broken faces of war. Medics carried the wounded inside, boots splashing through the mud. Anna took the first stretcher. The young soldier's face was blue from cold, his breath shallow. His uniform was stiff with frozen mud. She moved fast, cutting away fabric, wrapping his limbs, preparing the IV line. The American doctor nodded approvingly. "Good work." For hours they worked side by side. The nurses' German accents faded into the rhythm of medical language. Vitals, pulse, temperature, dosage. The sound of scissors, glass, and heartbeat monitors replaced the noise of war. When the chaos settled, Anna leaned against a support pole, exhausted. Her hands ached, but her heart felt strangely light. Here she wasn't seen as an enemy, she was needed. That afternoon, Greta found her sitting outside, watching the medics carry crates of supplies from a nearby truck. "Do you know what's inside those?" Greta asked. Anna shook her head. "Canned food, real coffee, vitamins, soap. They even have chocolate for the patients." Anna laughed softly. "Chocolate? For the wounded?" Greta nodded. "They believe it helps morale. Imagine that, medicine for the heart." As days turned to weeks, the German nurses became a quiet part of the American hospital's rhythm. The guards were still there, but the barbed wire felt symbolic now, more of procedure than punishment. At night, they were allowed to rest in a separate tent near the river. Some Americans came by to share music from a portable phonograph. They played swing tunes, laughing softly. The nurses listened, unsure whether to smile. One evening, as rain drummed softly on the canvas roof, Captain Carter approached Anna. "I've read your file. You studied medicine in Munich before the war?" "Yes, sir. I was training to be a nurse when they drafted me into service." He nodded thoughtfully. "You're skilled. You could have been a doctor." Anna looked down. In Germany, women didn't become doctors easily. Not during this war. "Here, we've got women running surgical teams," he said with a faint grin. "Different rules, I guess." She met his gaze, unsure whether to envy or admire that difference. Later that night, Anna wrote a letter she couldn't send. She wrote it to her mother in Munich. "I am alive. The Americans treat us fairly. Their hospitals are like small miracles. They have medicines we never dreamed of, and they use them freely, to save, not to judge. Sometimes I wonder how two nations so different could fight the same war." The next morning, the camp awoke to news that Paris had been liberated. Some American soldiers cheered. The nurses, unsure how to react, simply listened. Greta murmured, "Perhaps the war is really ending." But not yet. More wounded arrived daily, the hospital overflowed. Anna found herself assisting in surgeries that lasted hours. She watched in awe as American surgeons used penicillin after every operation. Infections that once meant certain death were now survivable. One night, she asked Captain Carter quietly, "How did you get so much of this medicine? We've never had enough." He hesitated, then replied, "Factories back home, thousands of people making it day and night. Everyone contributes. That's how we win, not just with guns." His words echoed in her mind. Everyone contributes. A few days later, a convoy arrived. German POWs badly wounded from an air raid. The American doctors decided to treat them as well. Anna and the other German nurses worked frantically beside their former enemies, cleaning wounds, stitching skin, whispering reassurances in German. One German soldier clutched on his wrist weakly. "Are we prisoners?" She smiled faintly. "You're patients now, that's all." When the operation ended, Captain Carter placed a hand on her shoulder. "That was good work." She nodded silently, but inside her heart twisted. The same men she once served beside were now lying on American cots, alive, only because of American medicine. That night, she couldn't sleep. She stepped outside, the moonlight reflecting off wet canvas. The valley was quiet, except for the rustle of the river. She looked toward the distant front lines, thinking of all the lives lost for something that was already collapsing. Greta joined her quietly. "You can't stop thinking, can you?" Anna sighed. "I just don't understand. We were told the Americans were brutal, barbaric, but here they save even our wounded. Why didn't we know this truth before?" Greta looked at her, weary but wise. Because truth is a casualty of every war. Days passed. The Americans began preparing to move the hospital further east as the front advanced. Supplies were packed, patients stabilized, and new orders handed out. The German nurses would remain under American supervision, but they were now trusted to handle wards alone. Snowflakes drifted across the muddy roads as the convoys moved east. It was the beginning of 1945, and winter wrapped Europe in silence. The front lines were shifting again, and the American field hospitals followed the push toward the Rhine. Anna Vogel sat in the back of a transport truck, holding her coat tight against the wind. The convoy rumbled past ruined villages, houses with no roofs, churches missing their steeples, and the quiet ghosts of war lingering in every window. The German nurses no longer wore their old uniforms. They now looked like part of the American medical team, though a faint distance still lingered in every interaction. The hospital was reassembled near the outskirts of a small German town that had just been taken by U.S. forces. The locals watched from behind half-broken fences, their faces wary and pale. For Anna and Greta, it was a strange sight, to be back on German soil, but not as citizens. The American field hospital set up with its usual speed and precision. Within a day, generators hummed, tents stood tall, and the smell of disinfectant filled the air again. Anna was assigned to the new surgical wing, while Greta managed a recovery tent. It didn't take long for the new wave of wounded to arrive, American, British, and German alike. The war had no nationality when it came to suffering. That night, Anna stood at a patient's bedside, a young American soldier no older than 18. He had lost his leg to artillery fire. His face was pale, but his eyes were still full of youth. When he opened them, he whispered, "Will I walk again?" Anna hesitated, then answered softly, "Not as before, but you will live, and that's something the world needs right now." He nodded weakly, closing his eyes. When she stepped outside, the cold bit into her skin. Snow covered the tents, turning the camp into a white ghost town. Yet within there was warmth, light, and the endless pulse of life-saving work. Days turned into weeks. Anna noticed how the Americans shared everything, food, medicine, blankets, with both allies and captives. Even the German civilians who approached the camp gates for help were not turned away. Mothers brought sick children, old men came with frostbitten hands, and the Americans treated them all. One afternoon, an American nurse handed Anna a clipboard. She said, "We're opening a clinic for civilians in the town square. We'll need you to translate." Anna's heart tightened. Translate? You mean help my own people? The nurse smiled. Yes. They're your people, aren't they? The next morning, Anna and a few others walked into the ruined town under an American flag of truce. Civilians gathered in silence, unsure what to expect. The clinic was set up in the shell of an old schoolhouse, its walls blackened by fire. Tables were lined with medical kits, blankets, and food rations. When the first German woman approached, a mother with a feverish child, Anna knelt beside her. "Don't be afraid," she said softly. "We're here to help." The woman looked at her in disbelief. You work with them?" Anna nodded. "Yes. They save everyone they can." The woman began to cry, clutching her child as the American doctor examined him. The moment was silent, heavy, and deeply human. The war seemed to vanish in that room, replaced by something stronger than nations. Over the following weeks, word spread that the Americans' hospital treated anyone, friend or foe. Lines of civilians formed outside the gates. Anna and Greta worked from dawn till dusk, translating, treating, comforting. But not all Germans understood. One night, a captured German officer, recovering from a wound, glared at Anna as she checked his pulse. "You should be ashamed," he hissed. "Helping them, you betray your own blood." Anna paused, her expression calm. "I'm helping the wounded. I no longer care what uniform they wear." The officer turned away, muttering curses. But his words didn't shake her. They only reminded her how far she had come from the blind loyalty that once ruled her heart. In February, news spread through the camp that the Americans had crossed the Rhine. The end was near. Soldiers spoke of victory, of going home, of peace. But for Anna, peace felt distant, like a dream too fragile to trust. That night, Captain Carter called a brief meeting. His voice was quiet but steady. "Listen, everyone. As we move deeper into Germany, we'll see things you can't prepare for. Concentration camps, civilians starving, towns burned to ash. Whatever you see, remember who you are. We heal. That's our duty." Anna didn't understand what he meant until a week later. A convoy arrived from the east carrying survivors from a liberated labor camp. The stench of sickness and starvation filled the air long before the truck stopped. The men and women who stepped out were little more than shadows. Their eyes were hollow, their bones visible beneath torn clothing. Anna froze. "Dear God," she whispered. Greta's voice trembled. "What have they done?" The American doctors moved fast, setting up quarantine tents. The nurses worked without rest, cleaning wounds, feeding the weak, wrapping the dying. Some survivors spoke German, others Polish or French. Their stories came out in fragments, months of hunger, forced marches, death without reason. That night, Anna stood alone outside the tent, her hands shaking. The truth of what her country had done was unbearable. She had served under a flag that promised greatness, but what it delivered was horror. Captain Carter found her there. "You all right?" he asked gently. Anna looked at him, tears running down her cheeks. "All this time, I thought we were serving our country. I thought we were helping. But this is what we became." He sat beside her in silence. After a moment, he said, "The best thing you can do now is help them live. You can't undo the past, but you can fight what it created." Anna nodded slowly. "Then I'll keep fighting, just not with weapons." Spring came. The snow melted into rivers of mud, and the sounds of artillery grew distant. The Americans advanced faster now, and German resistance crumbled. In April, the radio brought the news: Hitler was dead. The camp was silent for a long time after the announcement. Then one of the American medics murmured, "It's over." But Anna knew it wasn't truly over. Not for the wounded, not for the broken families, not for the nurses who had seen too much to ever return to who they once were. In May, the war officially ended. The stars and stripes fluttered above the hospital as fireworks burst in distant towns. The Americans celebrated quietly, tired beyond joy. Anna and Greta stood near the river, watching the reflection of the lights in the water. Greta spoke first. "Do you think they'll let us go home now?" Anna nodded faintly. "Yes, but I don't know where home is anymore." Weeks later, the German nurses were processed for release. They were given documents, food rations, and a small sum for travel. Before they left, Captain Carter shook Anna's hand. He said, "You did good work. You helped save lives on both sides."
"Thank you," she replied, "for showing us that mercy can exist even in war." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the only thing that ever wins." Anna and Greta boarded a truck bound for Bavaria. The countryside rolled by, fields returning to green, rivers flowing clear again. Children waved from the roadside, not yet understanding what the war had cost.